so the Bible talks about this, and I wanted to just get any ancient wisdom around getting married. And right after Layla and I got married, we went through all the divorce stuff so that we could understand why people get divorced. And so we went through all of these marriage retreats that are meant for like crisis marriages.
You went to them? You attended
we went
them?
through we went through like the materials. We bought the workbooks and watched the seminars.
Gotcha.
And it was super helpful for us. There was a great one. It's a Christian thing, even if you're not faith-based. I'm not. It was called Love and Respect. And it was basically talking about how like men have different needs than women do. Men need respect, women tend to need love. And so talking like in those terms was really helpful for us. And I think in a lot of ways just validated how we had set up our relationship. But the only line in the Bible about picking a mate, not being married, there's tons of stuff on being married, but only one on picking. And it was pick someone you go to war with. And when I think about that was, I'd thought about it before we did get married, and like she was somebody who had gone through war with me. You know what I mean? And when she went to Hawaii, which is when we did that launch, when we split up, right, or went on a break, whatever. When she did that, think about it from her perspective for a second. So she met this guy on the internet. 4 weeks later, he flashes some money. She quits her job, which she had a good career. Starts flying around the country. As soon as she starts flying around the country, meets a partner, she disagrees with it, opens up more businesses. I thought I quit to do this thing with you, but now you're doing lots of things. Then says, I don't think I want to do this anymore. And then at that point, when you're living in a motel with this dude who says he doesn't want to be with you, you then fly to Hawaii and still make him money. And so like when my world was crumbling at that point, like Layla stood tall and she crushed it. Like she didn't just like do okay. She broke and set the record to this day for a single launch location. And so like, to me, when she came back and I had some space, I'd finished this partnership, you know, I'd cleaned up some of my personal space. It was like when the chips were down, and not everyone can be that lucky where you get to like see someone go test, you know what I mean? That kind of thing. It's kind of like you can say you're loyal, but until you have the opportunity to cheat, you aren't anything.
Yes.
Like you need evidence to claim the trait. And so like Layla's tough as nails. And so when she did that and came back, and that was all the money that I needed to like do try yet again and then fail.
Only temporarily.
Yeah, right. For my next temporary success leading only to failure. That was just like she was somebody that I would go to war with. And you know, the last thing that I'll add to this is, again, I want to put the big giant disclaimer here, which is like, this is just what worked for us. Do whatever you want. There are no shoulds. Live your life. You don't have to get married. I believe, like, I'm not even like pro marriage. I'm just pro my marriage. Like I see most marriages, I'm like, I wouldn't want that. You know what I mean? So I, as an institution, not the biggest fan. We talked about what it would look like for us to split up. What would we do about the business? And we both agreed. And even to this day, nothing would really change. I would just live somewhere else and we'd still do business together because we enjoy doing business together. And so I get questions from guys who are like, how do I get my girl to like whatever? And I'm like, you're not. She always liked it. You're not going to change the person. And so one of the things that I loved about Layla was that up front, she said, I'm never going to try and change you. And to me, that was very freeing because like, I'm weird in my own ways. You know what I mean? And almost like that little microcosm of that story with the proposal.
Yeah.
And mind you, lovely family, lovely people, awesome. But it was just pure acceptance. And so I think that like if you can find somebody who just accepts you, like truly, isn't like, hey, you should dress this way, or hey, you should cut your hair like this, or hey, like because like there's big implications in that statement. It's, I don't care what you want for you. I want you to look like this for me. Now, you could make the argument, well, I'm the one who looks at you all day and you want me to be attracted to you, et cetera. But like, in my opinion, again, one man's 2 cents, is that you should be attracted, should is a strong word, is that I think it works better if you were attracted to that person's natural state. Because if the way they act, the way they dress, the way they are is someone that you are attracted to, then I think that's the game. I think you've won. And so I'm a big believer in, Layla and I call it loving logically, which is counter to all the Hollywood stuff. But like we talked about, like, okay, well, what happens if we get divorced? What happens with the business? How are we going to do that? And I was like, we're just going to keep running. It's like, okay, cool. Layla and I have had one argument, and it wasn't like a screamer match. It was just like she really didn't want me to do this business thing, and I really wanted to do it. And I steamrolled her, and I did it.
Yeah.
And it was the wrong call. It was the wrong call. Yeah, it was the wrong call. And she was right. But you know what? She's never once brought it up.
That's dope.
Yeah, she's never once been that way. And so I got a piece of advice from a pastor about it. And he said something to us that was really helpful. He said, if you don't agree, don't move forward. And we've actually stuck with that. So people are like, what happens when it's a 50-50? It's like you keep fucking working. Sorry. You keep working on it.
Yeah.
You know, you keep working on it. And eventually you come up with a solution, that works for both. You compromise if you need to. But I'm a big believer in if you have the same information, you should make the same decision. And so if we don't agree on something, the first thing we'll usually say is what information are you working off of?
Yeah.
Which means that I have an incomplete data set compared to yours. And so then we share info rather than like arguing. It's like, oh, hold on, what are you thinking about? And like sometimes she's like, oh, what about this employee might take it? I was like, that's a great point. Didn't think about that. Good call. Or sometimes I have something, you know what I mean? Yeah. But loving logically in that, like, I think arranged marriages they have higher
success rate
significantly. And I think it's a combination of two things. Yeah. One is low expectations. Second is high commitment. So like, if you define a successful marriage as one that does not break, which is not, I mean, it's a low bar, but at least it keeps you married, right? I don't think Layla and I had huge expectations. Both of us weren't like planning on getting married. And if anything, I was getting out of like a fiance thing. And when we met, I said, I'm not interested in anything long-term. Like, I was like, I'm living life. And if you want to live it with me, you can. And so our dates, we hung out every day after that first date was, I'm working all day. If you want to work next to me, cool. And so that's how our quote dates work.
I think just that in itself is very powerful. Just enjoying being in someone's presence.
Yeah.
Even if you're not like entertaining one another or in date mode or whatever, like just liking, hey, I'm working. You know what? I like you just being there.
Yeah.
I think that in itself says a lot.
And I'll give you my last one because I know I just gave a bunch of them.
No, dude, this is great right here. This is great.
I think 3 pieces, and they're actually the same as they are with business, is that you want someone with an aligned mission, aligned values, and similar tastes or lifestyle. So aligned mission is like, do we want to go to the same place? Right. And I've looked at a lot of past relationships, they wanted different things from life. Again, I want it like, there's nothing wrong with that. Like if you want different things, then awesome. Like just go do what you want to do and try and find somebody else who also wants to do that thing. And then that way you don't have to spend the rest of your life either resenting that person or compromising. Like, again, I'm not like a huge pro marriage guy. I'm pro like do you. And if there's somebody else that's doing them and you can do that together, I think that's great.
Yeah.
I mean, men live 12 years longer on average who are married. It's a life. So you want 12 more years, there you go. So one is aligned mission. You want to go to the same place. The second is aligned values, which is you want to get there the same way. Right? It's like, how are we going to choose to navigate how we're getting there? And Layla and I share very similar values. I remember, I think it was the first date, I was talking about upsells and some business thing. And she was just parroting back to me like all the stuff that this business was doing. And I was like, so you see that? She was like, yeah. And I felt really seen because I was like, I don't talk to anybody who thinks this stuff's interesting. And she was like, yeah, and then they do this. That's how they get you, blah, blah, blah. And I think that for me made me feel a lot less alone. Because I think a lot of times, I mean, probably a lot of guys and girls, like you feel very alone. And I think if you can have someone who doesn't make you feel alone, that's a really big gift. Because a lot of people are in relationships where like when you go to sleep at night and the person's next to you, you're laying on the pillow, you're like, darn, there you go. See, I didn't curse. Like, what am I doing? Like, what's like, and you feel more alone in that moment than you were when you were alone, right? Or lonely, whatever the quippy saying is. And so you want to have somebody who wants to get there the same way as you. Because I think if you have a shared experience of reality, then you get to enjoy everything together. If you have a different experience, which is why like when people live lives together and they live separate lives, I think one of the tough parts is like if the lady is at home all the time and the guy's getting exposed to work stimuli all the time, you're going to adapt to the environment you're in. And if you're in different environments, like in the beginning, the opposites attract part is what creates the chemistry. But if there isn't enough overlap, then it just fizzles because they're just two strangers. That it doesn't actually make sense for them to be together. Because like, why would you just be with this random girl who like, sure, maybe she's attractive, but then like, then what? Like she's into completely different things than you, right? And then it's like you have no shared interests, which is really the last one, which is like the tastes and lifestyle and the things you enjoy doing.
Yeah.
So it's like, we both like fitness. If I liked fitness and the person I dated didn't like fitness, that would be a big part of my life that I wouldn't really like the way I eat and the way I work out.
Yeah. It's a big one.
It's a big chunk, right? Like if I didn't have somebody who was into that, like that is a pain.
Yeah.
Like that's just like now for me to be me, I actually, it's like a give on the other person. Like I have to ask for like, there's all this time I'm not going to spend with you for the rest of our lives together because of this interest that I have.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I think with that one in particular, and I've seen this happen in other people's situations, is it can create resentment.
Yes.
Right? Because if you're someone who is training and you're looking after your body, you're minding what you eat, you're putting in all this effort, and you're with someone who just wants to sit there and eat trash and not exercise and not train and, you know, get out of shape in the process. Yeah. And in the process of that, it leads to people getting out of shape and, you know, you're there and, you know, you're in good shape. Yeah. And then, you know, your wife or girlfriend is kind of slowly ballooning up over the years, right? It creates resentment on both angles because you're like, hey, like, stop being a slob. Like, eat properly. Like, you know, you want to push them in that way, not in a mean way, but you want to encourage them, and you do want them to look good. And then they can also have that envy or jealousy of like, hey, like I don't, you know, I'm sure you've seen situations where women want to like fatten up their men a little bit to kind of like keep.
Oh no, I have.
Right, like they're like, no, I don't want you. You're a little too ripped. You're looking a little too good, right? And it creates this very odd. Yeah. It creates a very weird dynamic. So something like, you know, being into fitness might not seem on paper like, oh, this is something important, but I actually think it is. I think it's very important. I think it's also important that I can see with you and her, you both have the self-improvement streak, right? If you're someone who's into self-improvement and you're with someone who is not, again, over time, that gap just grows. If you're just like, I'm getting better all the time, like I'm working, I'm trying to get better, I'm trying to level up, and the other person's just happy to just stay the same and just stagnate, again, over time, it creates the shift. And I think I don't know. I've seen that play out with other people. I'm very observant of other people's relationships, whether it's successful or unsuccessful. I like to learn from it all and then be like, okay, cool. I'm making notes on all this stuff, just like I do with other aspects of life.